Meantime, it has been 3 days since the U.S. and Israel launched a military attack on Iran, killing Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which has sparked mixed reactions. Some happy to see the Iranian regime toppled. Others question the U.S.'s involvement, but everyone is wondering what is next for Iran. And joining us now is Professor Seth Weinberger with the University of Puget Sound, a specialist in international relations, security, and war powers. Professor, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Okay, let's start with the act of war against Iran by U.S. forces. Many are saying the president doesn't have unilateral power to start a war like this. What's your opinion on that?
I have a pretty sort of iconoclastic view on this. I actually don't think that the constitutional power to declare war is really about the use of force abroad. History, I think, shows pretty clearly that American presidents have repeatedly over time used force without a declaration of war and often without even any kind of explicit congressional authorization or appropriations. So at least for the moment, I think President Trump is on relatively solid legal footing.
Okay, so now you wrote a book on the Bush administration's war on terror, which did go through appropriations and did have a lot of public support until it spilled into Iraq and cost trillions of dollars, millions of death, went on for 20 years without a real victory. Now, when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that this will be a quick war, do you believe that he's being realistic?
You know, it's really hard to judge that because we're getting so many different stories from the administration about what the goal is. So I think when it started a couple of days ago, they were talking about regime change, but now they've sort of jettisoned that explanation, and they're talking about destroying Iran's missile capabilities, their ballistic missiles, their launchers, and their production capabilities. They're even talking about destroying their ability to produce IEDs, the kinds of roadside bombs that were used against American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. If that's really what the United States wants to do, that's going to take a long, long time. Those things are made in basements and garages. They're relatively low tech. So it's going to really depend what the administration wants to get out of this war. And they're not really telling us, I think, or at least they're not being straightforward about what the goal is. So then it gets really hard to assess how long this is going to take.
One point that's being made now by Democrats is that there was no imminent threat on the United States, possibly Israel, but not the United States. And so given that the U.S. and Iran were negotiating as of last week, what explains the timing here?
Well, you know, I think, and this is totally sort of my gut. I think that what likely happened is that given that the United States was able and Israel were able to get to target so many of the leading Iranian politicians and military leaders at one place, my guess is that given the ongoing negotiations, they were meeting to discuss whether or not how to negotiate with the United States, whether or not to make concessions. And I suspect, especially in the context of Marco Rubio's comment, that Israel decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, to try to wipe out the entire Iranian leadership at one strike. And that sort of dragged the United States in. I think Secretary of State Rubio's comment was really telling that it was an imminent threat sort of to Israel, or in the response to a potential Israeli strike, that really drove the United States' decision.
So what happens to Iran now? Who will lead that country, and what role do you think Israel plays in Iran and in the Middle East as a whole?
Well, you know, I don't know a lot about sort of Iranian internal politics. So I'm not sure who they're going to pick next. I know that they were supposed to meet this morning, and the U.S. and Israel targeted the Council of Elders, or excuse me, the Council of Experts group, who was supposed to pick the next leader. So my guess is that they're not going to make that decision anytime soon. You know, I think the question is, and President Trump has sort of talked about this too. You know, again, is the point to sort of produce a Venezuela kind of outcome where someone in, say, the Revolutionary Guard sort of takes over and it kind of goes back to business as usual, just without Khamenei? Or is the point to sort of encourage the Iranian people to rise up? I don't really have a sense of what the United States wants, again, because they haven't really said. Israel's not really talking about it. Israel's going after Hezbollah in Lebanon. You know, so I think what you're getting is sort of a little bit of, you know, I'd like to think that behind the scenes they know what they're doing, but that overtly, publicly, they're not really giving a sense of what the goal or what the purpose of the mission is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big questions, and there's so much more that we could discuss. But Professor, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.